Hey, sup guys, Carn here. So we finally got the Phrecia event patch notes, and there's quite a bit to talk about here. So I'm gonna try to go through it as fast as possible. First of all, if you're allergic to constructive criticism, move along, stop watching. I will be criticizing some of the decisions made and some of the things I do not like about the event. Obviously, there's still some good things, so I'm gonna talk about those too, but people usually like to focus on quote-unquote complaining. This is not what it is. I'm just giving my opinion on the patch and just giving feedback. So I'm gonna start with the main thing with that influences a lot of the consequences these changes have in general, and this is the additional area modifiers that randomly appear in every zone that you're gonna enter. So you're gonna have random map mods. It starts from campaign, so probably I'm assuming one extra mod in campaign, probably the entire way. Then maybe 2 extra mod in white maps, and I don't know, 3 in yellow maps. I'm not sure exactly how they're gonna tune this, but I would say we get at least 3 extra modifiers in red maps, or maybe in tier 14 plus. Could be 4, hard to say, and that will also be in effect in things like tier 17s. So overall, one thing that needs to be understood very, very early is that this league will be a lot more difficult than the regular game. I would say that it is probably gonna be more difficult than something like Gauntlet, because it will be very unpredictable. A lot of combination of mods could result in extremely dangerous situations and extremely difficult maps. And that is important because this will limit the amount of builds that are going to be viable or that are going to be good on league start, especially because of this here. So as you can see, there's some mods that will not appear because they're considered brick mods for certain builds. Like obviously Reflect, they cannot spawn randomly. Apparently the ground effects won't. Less recovery, less regen, twin boss leech immune, all these things. I also have it on good authority for those who are worried about steel charges and things like that, CDR. These things will also not be in. I am pretty certain of it. So it is just has not been documented yet. So do not fret. There should not be things like steel charges, CDR, all that stuff. From what I understand, it's mostly gonna be modifiers that do not affect the player directly. And it's just gonna be stuff like monster damage, monster life, all this stuff is like generically affecting monsters. Now, the problem with that is that this will reduce the pool of mods significantly, which means that most maps will have things like minus max, pen. One thing that is also pretty bad is, I don't know if it's gonna be in the pool or not, but monsters cannot be stunned should be in the pool. And that will break one of the options that you would have for league start, especially as melee, which is Bone Shatter. Bone Shatter is not really playable without it. Like, technically, you could still play it if you play it, but your clear is going to be atrocious. And I definitely would not recommend anything like that. But either way, the game's going to be a lot harder. So you're going to need a lot stronger builds to be able to progress comfortably. Some builds, like I said, Bone Shatter are going to be bricked. And there's probably other things maybe that are going to slip through. We'll have to see. Which brings me to the next point, which is going to be unnecessary nerfs and big nerfs. So, as we know, it's supposed to be an event for fun. There's like a 3-week, pretty short event with Phrecia, ascendancies, idols, all that stuff. Could have been very fun. The problem is the choices are pretty limited because most ascendancies, Phrecia ascendancies, do not have very many defense at all. There's very few ascendancies that have defense. And the ones that don't have much. The only one that had good defense was Commander, and it got nerfed significantly. And let me make one thing clear first: some nerfs are 100% warranted, and I was 100% expecting, and they should have happened. For example, this one here. So endurance charges goes from +3 to +2. That is completely fine. This node was absurd. It is now pretty balanced, I would say. +2 endurance charges is fine. Defiance got indirectly nerfed because of the endurance charge. Obviously, if you lose, your mitigation goes down. Then the potency of Defiance also goes down. So, like, in my mind, this was not a necessary nerf. But that makes that node to me not that good anymore. It is still fine. Like you'll live. This is not the worst thing. Like I also saw that happen. Like I was expecting this for sure 100% to happen. This one I was thinking that it was not necessary, but I would not be too surprised if it happened. It did happen. And now the one that definitely should not have happened is this one here. So Call of the Ancestors used to be 120% increased cooldown, Warcry cooldown recovery rate and 30% reduced Warcry speed. And it's been pretty much swapped around, and that pretty much kills Commander. Well, what made Commander fun? Because the main thing is not even the power that you lose. Yeah, obviously you lose a lot of power, you lose a lot of damage for slams. Like this much Warcry CDR on League Start on day one was probably somewhere around 40 to 60% more damage depending on your setup. And that would temper off as you got later into the end game, got quality on your gems, got tattoos, etc. That would just temper off and become a lot worse. But for day one, the main thing it did is like if you played slams, it would make your build feel a lot less clunky, because you would have enough Warcry to use if you played Earth Shadow, for example, Shadow Commander, which would have been the go-to build. Then you would have a lot more Warcries available to you to actually be able to play the build, not sit there and be like, oh, I have no Warcries available because my cooldown recovery is too low. And that made the build a lot more fun because you got to use faster weapons, being hampered too much by the speed. And it was very, very fun to play. So like I said, these nerfs here deserved, should have happened. This one not so much. And this one I think completely kills it basically makes Commander into a worse Juggernaut. And you know, Juggernaut, as we know, is not really good early game, but at least has very good options end game, because it is still the best strength stack in Ascendancy. On the other hand, Ancestral Commander in endgame does not really have much going for it. So it is an Ascendancy that is now bad early game and also bad in endgame. So it doesn't really have a place. The only thing it has some defense, but it's like nothing too crazy. It's okay, it's reasonable defense, like it's decent defense, but nothing to write home about, pretty much. The other change that goes with the other option you would have for Ancestral Commander is like if you wanted to play Bone Shatter. And as I mentioned earlier, Bone Shatter is in a pretty bad spot considering the random modifiers in every area that you enter. Because of the monsters cannot be stunned mod, that I do not know if they're gonna consider that a brick mod. It is not on the list, and I do not think they're gonna do. Maybe, hopefully, if they see this, they consider removing it so that people who want to play Bone Shatter Commander can actually do that, because then you would have nodes to click, especially with this node here that's being buffed to +2 targets on top of the 50% extra reach, which is pretty big. Now the problem with that is like they swapped the location of these two nodes on the tree. So now if you want the +2 strike with extra reach, you have to go here, and you will have to allocate the very first node, which is Ancestral Echo. And Ancestral Echo, for purpose, is pretty much useless. It only really affects Flicker Strike. For anything else, it will help a bit with clear, but it is not really something that is easy to just play around. You'd have to basically leap slam attack, not look behind you, and assume that your Echo is gonna kill stuff behind you that's still alive. Again, this is not very reliable. It's really a node that only benefits Flicker Strike, and that's pretty much it. So this is pretty bad. I think if that node stayed at this place, then you could definitely play Bone Shatter Commander and just do this, right? Maybe even just don't do Defiance, because Defiance is kind of mediocre now, and go for Bloodline Ascendancy. But as is, Commander is just Jug, pretty much. So it is pretty boring. Nothing really changes there. And yeah, this change to me is like by far the worst. It removes a lot of options. I understand that this was very powerful for stuff like General's Cry, and it was also very strong for slams in general. But it was not overpowered in any way. It was just a very strong starter, and League starters right now are not very strong. There's not really... I would say that League starts for a lot of skills, a lot of archetypes are actually pretty mediocre. And Sam's like the one exception where it was very good for League starts and that don't feel too bad. So I really don't like this change. I think this node, again, like the way, well, I haven't talked about the change they actually made, which is making it more cry speed instead with less cry cooldown recovery rate, which doesn't make any sense because losing cry cooldown recovery rate is something you will never want to do under any circumstance. The only time you would want to do that, you'd be okay with that trade, is if you would have something like Warcry have infinite power, because then you want to self-cast a lot of different Warcries, and in that case, it does make sense to want to have this much Warcry speed, because Warcry speed is not a stat that you need that much of. You just need enough for your character to play smoothly. And usually that is accomplished by simply clicking the Admonisher cluster here, which is 80%, and then you have Urgent Order, which is around also 80%, and that's 160%. So like, all this does is like, okay, then you will say you do not have to use Urgent Order and you do not have to click this node. Except by not clicking these nodes and getting this Ascendancy node instead, you lose 30% Warcry cooldown recovery rate. And you would always spend 3 to 4 points on your tree to have 30% Warcry cooldown recovery rate. So that Ascendancy node is pretty much a net neutral, doesn't do anything. As is, this node is completely dead. I don't think there's any reason to ever click that. Do not click it. I'm gonna move on to the rest, which is mostly smaller tweaks, small buffs, small nerfs here and there. For the most part, I'm mostly gonna focus on the mid ascendancies that I was already kind of interested in before. So it's gonna be Behemoth, and I'm gonna talk about the dual ascendancies as well. Scavenger maybe a little bit. Yeah, that's pretty much. I'm not gonna talk too much about the other ones. Like obviously, Bog Shaman is no secret. Like for any life stacking build, is very good. It also got buffed. So there's like nothing really new here, just everything got better here. Same for Herald, Harbinger. Pretty much everything got buffed, like Blind Prophet got nerfed by a little bit. For the most part, it's mostly buffs. Ancestral Commander got pretty much dumpstered. Behemoth, now instead of having your spells disabled, has your auras disabled and your Warcries are disabled. The Warcry disabled part, I do not know why. I mean, obviously, the obvious reason why this is here is because, okay, you cannot have auras, but if you can have Warcries, then you can just auto-exert a bunch of Warcries. And that is how you will use a reservation. And, well, I mean, I think that should... I don't see why the need to limit that. I think that should be a choice you make. Do you want to use auto-exerts, or do you want to use things like... Now you can use Arctic Armor, Blood and Sand, all these things. You get to use Berserk again, you get to use Blood Rage, Frostblink, all these things now are available to Behemoth. So it is, while it was completely unplayable before, now it is actually playable. Not only that, it has really good endgame. They also buffed Mental Conditioning from 8 mana, from 4 mana to 8. So the strength mana stacking angle on Behemoth is very good, especially if you have a Paladin support to give you auras. Obviously, it was already very strong before as a carry in a party. Now it's gonna be even better, and there's also the option of just when you start a Behemoth, go the 45 right with some rage, and then go later into the armor stacking stuff via strength and mana. That one endgame I think is very strong because you get Incorruptible, and this coupled with Divine Flesh, Legion Keystone, that converts 50% of the elemental damage you take to Chaos, basically means that you apply your armor to half of the elemental damage you're taking, which is huge. Especially because you should be able to get a decent amount of armor with that. And obviously, you know, the whole armor stacking angle through stacking strength and mana is very appealing in game. Obviously, it still has the problem that early game you don't have much defense, like you have 10 fortification. There's also another angle you can do on Behemoth with just straight up stacking 45 using Celestial Brace, maybe Beacon of Madness, and do things like that and get a bunch of regen out of that, get a bunch of attack speed. Then we come back to the problem where, well, you cannot play slams, so you have to play some strikes or things like Reave, Cleave, things like that. I do think Behemoth is in a much better spot though, because you can also go the Berserk route as well while you're doing that. So there's definitely things to be done on Behemoth. I just don't think it will be necessarily the best at league start because you're not able to start slams, and everything, all the starters like besides slams are a little bit lackluster in my opinion. I'm gonna go talk about the other dual ascendancies. So Gambler, Paladin, Aristocrat. I think, as for starters go, I think Paladin is very good. So is Aristocrat. Aristocrat, again, you can play. It's actually a pretty good ascendancy for slams because you actually get to go centerpiece that's been buffed to 20%, as you can see here. So centerpiece is now 20% quality of all gems, and that means that your main skill will be able to get to 40% quality, so you will get the next threshold. So for example, for Earth Shatter, if you were to play Earth Shatter, you have an extra spike from that node here, on top of all the quality you'll get on your war cries and your auto exert, which will be 40% for your manual war cries, cooldown recovery rate, and 50% for your auto exert. So that is a pretty big amount of, a pretty good amount of damage. And also you get 8 skill points just from these 3 ascendancy nodes. Obviously it goes up to 9. I would say that for the last ascendancy you would probably get the bloodline ascendancy, probably breach one, and go with that, or yeah, probably the breach one. And 8 points on melee builds that are pretty starved on points is pretty significant. It actually allows you to make up for the fact that you're kind of losing this node. This node here is you don't really gain much from that. But overall, Aristocrat for slams will feel pretty good. Again, the only problem, which is the main problem that most ascendancies have, is you have 0 defense. But yeah, and obviously endgame you have the entire strength stacking / int stacking angle that you can do in endgame, which is obviously gonna be very strong. So there is also that. Paladin lacks endgame, sadly. I think this for League Start you can do a lot of things. You can play Volcanic Fissure of Snaking with Bring the Battle, Elemental Valiance, this entire chain line here with the early determination, especially in Axe, is extremely powerful. When you're leveling in campaign, you will do your first lab at level 30-ish, and you will have level 30 determination, which is insane for leveling in campaign. You will be pretty much immortal at that point. To give you numbers, determination level 30 gives 1700 armor and 55% more armor. So you will get the armor, as much armor as a character has entering maps probably as soon as you level 30, and then obviously it just goes up from there. So it is very strong defensively early on. Later on, it kind of falls off if you play elemental. I think what I'm thinking about doing is probably just play Fist Slams, and obviously you cannot use the term because of that. And just go for Bring the Battle stem. Warcry's Infinite Power is pretty good. It gives you a lot of armor, gives you a lot of regen, gives you max res if you're willing to press another button for Ancestral Cry. Technically, you could also use Vengeful Cry as well to get the max rage, to get all that stuff, but no. More buttons to press pretty much. And I think what I would probably do is something like that, and do Bring the Battle, Infinite Power here, Consecrated Ground, which is 7.5% life regen, on top of 75% reduction of curse effect on you, which is, yeah, for an ascendancy node, overall it's not that insane, but it's still pretty nice. It allows you to get a pretty significant amount of regen with the Infinite Power and Enduring Cry, and you can scale it like that. Also, because it is life regen and not leech, you can actually scale it pretty well through gear with the life regen rate on gloves, boots, and helmets. So you can probably get like higher recovery than you would be able to get on a Slayer, for example. And obviously, Field Medicine has a 40% flask effect, pretty self-explanatory. Very strong in Mage Blood, for example, and you would probably use that as well, just during progression, maybe for a Balbala setup, Mage Blood, Ties of Time, all these things. Pretty strong. I still think that endgame is gonna obviously lack damage. Like, you have some damage here, which is nice. And if you would want to push the damage further, you probably have to go elemental and go with something that actually scales elemental damage properly, which is not slams, because that side of the tree is mostly physical damage, sadly. So you will not benefit from anger much, you will not benefit from wrath much. So it is a bit awkward for that. But obviously you could play Smite. I'd say it's probably the main thing you could play on Paladin that would do relatively well. Still probably worse than Slam, sadly, by a decent amount. So Yeah, and obviously, finally, a Gambler. I think Gambler is also pretty good. Gambler, they changed growing accumulator to be 40% chance to deal triple damage and 30% less damage. So this makes this node feel a lot better. Having both triple damage and double damage does not really synergize well together at all. And having 40% triple damage will just feel a lot better. The damage will be a lot more consistent. And overall, this will be about 26% more damage node, which is very strong for one ascendancy node if you compare it to pretty much any other ascendancy nodes in the game. So it is pretty solid. Also, technically it is more than that, because also if you do sliding damage, you'll get higher shocks. So it should be more around, like, I don't know, it really depends on your character, but like it's at least 26% more damage, probably closer to like 30 to 35% more damage, I would say. And obviously this has been buffed to risk aversion. Where is it? It has been buffed to 66%, just makes it easier to cap avoidance for stun and elemental aimants. Pretty good change here too. And I think they added max block here on heads and tails for attack damage and spell damage respectively. So not only it's lucky, but you get extra max block chance. So okay, that's nice. And overly confident now also works all the time instead of only when you're low life. So damage enemies hitting you always unlucky. Also pretty decent. You probably kick that early on, for sure. And the main one is reverse odds, which I think is gonna be very valuable in Phrecia because, again, going back to the map mod thing, because there's gonna be a pretty few number of mods remaining, you will encounter elemental res on your maps pretty frequently, and having 50% chance to invert is extremely valuable. It is a lot of damage. It is probably about double damage overall. So, and these maps will probably have, like, every other map, I would say every, I don't know, 2-3 maps you'll have 80 res on there, probably. If it's like 3 to 4 mods every map, that will happen. Because you're gonna have all the mods that are excluded because they're bricks, and then the mods that you put on your map directly that cannot roll, and then, well, yeah, you're left with not very much in there, which is makes that node extremely strong, I think. Again, Gambler, same problem. Lackluster defense, but you still have some defense. Again, damage is unlucky, and you have a 50% chance to defend with 90 res, which is a pretty good multi-hit mitigation. But yeah, overall, the dual ascendancies have stuff to be done for sure. Especially start, I think these two are pretty good. Main problem again is defense. Again, that's the biggest problem I have with this. And then it's Scavenger as well, that I think would be pretty good for as far as melee ascendancy goes. They did nerf Void Battery and Cloak of Flame, but they buffed Doomfetch, buffed Starforge a little bit. And then we have also they buffed Midnight, and I think I don't know what Auras was exactly before. Auras was yeah, okay, they just gave it some ignite chance. So we basically get, so you can get actually proper frenzy charge generation and calling strike. So this is actually also pretty decent buff. So you don't have to worry about finding ignite chance somewhere else. But yeah, overall, that's pretty much where I'm at. I hate the commander change. I feel like the extra mods I do not like too much because it limits the options you have, and it's gonna make it pretty difficult to have a successful league start if you're trying something new, you're trying some weaker skills or weaker builds. You will be... These type of builds will get kind of smashed, especially when you're trying to do tier 17s, and the tier 17 mods already can be a problem, and then on top of it you add a bunch of 3 to 4 mods that can sometimes break your build in case of Bone Shatter and all that stuff. You will need a very strong build, and they kind of nerfed extremely heavily one of the options, especially for hardcore. Like, obviously I play hardcore, so it is a big consideration for me, but I think hardcore or not, if you're not playing one of the couple of senses that have defense, like, you should expect to die a lot. There's gonna be a lot of deaths, there's gonna be a lot of struggle. Even for, like, because even if you play the sense like Ancestral Commander, it's still gonna have some defense, it's gonna have no damage, and you're gonna have maps with some extra life as extra, yes, maybe some more PDR or Eli Res, which is one thing that I haven't touched on yet. But again, because of how the map mod, the extra modifiers is gonna work, res and PDR will be extremely common, which is one of the reasons I am pretty reluctant to play an elemental builds that are not on Gambler because of that, because you would not have a way to deal with that properly unless you have a lot of shred, like a lot of you have curses, you have exposure, all that stuff, pen. Unless you have a lot of that, it's gonna be pretty painful when you run into these mods. One of the reasons I don't know how I feel about elemental Paladin with elemental damage. On the other hand, for physical damage, it's a lot easier to circumvent that because you can just get sources of overwhelm are relatively accessible, and they kind of solve that problem altogether. But yeah, that's my thoughts on this. I was excited because I was looking forward to playing Commander, but we cannot. I think I will. My plans now are probably gonna be to start Paladin, just because I'm playing hardcore, so I can't really mess around. Another problem too is that we got the patch notes so late. There was quite a few things that I would have liked to test for League Start to see like how to progress properly and maybe share with you guys, give you other options than just just play slams. But sadly we just don't have time. We got the patch notes like 2 days before the league even starts, which means there's no time to test stuff properly through the progression and make sure that some of these skills that I think might be good, because there's a few things that I'm wanted to test, for example, to try on a Behemoth as well, but since Behemoth can use slams, you'd have to try, I don't know, some strikes, maybe some stuff like stuff that are not necessarily strikes or slams, like Reeve, Cleave, all that stuff. Like obviously, like I'm not saying necessarily that these are probably good for League Start, then probably not, but I did want to test some stuff, we just don't have time to do that, so I'm just gonna stick to what we know. And I'm probably gonna play Paladin slams with the intent of stacking max res, maybe with Ellie flasks, playing with field medicine, Warcry infinite power to get some max res, a bunch of armor, regen, and eventually go into schizophrenic dissociation, which is normally not usable if you're not Slayer, but I think Paladin can get enough regen that you will be able to actually sustain that properly and use it properly through concentrated ground. Consecrated ground with the extra effect and Undying Cry regen with infinite power, Warcry buff effect, all that stuff. So these are my thoughts. Thanks for watching. I know it was a little bit long, but it is what it is. Let me know what you think. I will be back and probably try theory crafting a little bit PoE in the Paladin League Start I'll do and share with you guys later. But so you can check me out at twitch.tv/Carn_. So like and subscribe if you like the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Take care. Peace.